Welcome to Caffeinated Mornings, a show built around the idea of more conversation and less presentation. We dive deeper into discussions that go beyond the surface of the work. A big thank you to our sponsors who make this show possible. Today's episode is brought to you by the award-winning, strategically driven, independent, full-service agency TDA Boulder. And we can't forget Buck Ross Productions and Coop Studios for helping us capture and share this show with you. A special thanks to The Coffee Ride for keeping us caffeinated, and to Realtor Michelle Sander and the Zeal Group at RE/MAX, CMCI Studio, Snappy Little Numbers for our theme music, and Pro Photo Rental for their continued support. In this episode, we join everyone's favorite designer and host, Jay Farrakane, in an intimate discussion with recovering graphic designer and now mixed media artist, Andrew Barker. In this chat, we get to the core of what makes Andrew's approach and art so very much his own, from influences and inspiration to the hard work of the art business and finding his unique voice through it all. So get comfortable, get caffeinated, and get ready to be inspired and informed with our newest friend, Andrew Barker. Let's go.
Welcome, sir. Thank you for being here. I've been a fan of your work for a long time now, and I remember seeing it a few places before I ever met you. I think we met at Bliss. I was like shopping, holiday shopping or something like that, and you were there painting. And I was looking at your work, and I realized the work I was looking at, you were like making it like right there. And I just said, I'm going to introduce myself, and we shot the breeze. And I think the one thing that struck me immediately about you was your like chillness. You were super cool and just like really approachable and super positive too. Like I could tell you loved what you were doing, and it really stuck with me. I have a few prints in my house now, and I just love having it around. And I also want to mention you were scheduled to be a guest way back when, and then we had some hiatuses in between and all that kind of thing. Whatever, the schedule got all effed up, and so here you are finally. Thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to this talk for a while. So I do want to get started at kind of the beginning. You mentioned I called you a recovering graphic designer, and you were okay with that term. You have a background in graphic design. Do you want to talk a little bit about the journey from design into art? You were like, when we caught up last, it was like no surprise to me, it was by no accident. Maybe take us on a little journey about how you kind of made the decision and transition of like, I'm kind of like feeling like I need to make this creative move. How's that work?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things just came together at the right time. So a lot of it was just kind of lucky, but what really prompted it was I had been working in Portland for about 15 years before moving out here for a job at a design studio. Ended up losing that job at one point. But during that time of moving here and then finding myself kind of free from employment, I had started drawing and like creating art again for like the first time since art school. And it was just purely for fun. I was really inspired by a lot of the artwork that I was kind of into at the time, which was based around the music scene. I was looking at a lot of illustrators, particularly in like heavier music and metal. And I was just like, wow, I kind of want to do that. And so I just started sketching and eventually kind of just started creating this body of work. And so when I lost this job, I kind of wanted to see what I could do with it. Got it into like some kind of like temporary galleries and started showing. And then actually ended up taking another design job, which I was there for like a couple of years. And during that time, like I started to do like more fine art festivals, got more like gallery representation, and basically kind of had like a proof of concept that this is something that I could do for a living. And then to really kind of like give really make it brief. There was this one point at this job where I just kind of had to deal with some bullshit one day. And I was like, I've been doing this for 20 years, like mark the date on my calendar 6 months out. And I'm like, I'm going to make the change. give myself kind of that 6-month runway to get everything in like set up. I found myself a workspace up in North Boulder during that time, just made it happen. So.
And I think that's super telling because like I think that's indicative of your personality too, and maybe that's the background in design that you know. I always think designers a lot of times, however we end up coping with some of the distractions in design. Hey, I didn't enjoy this project, whatever that kind of stuff feels like. It was interesting to hear you say, okay, I picked this date 6 months out. It had to feel awesome to be like, hey, I have this, I'm putting this lifeboat out there for myself. I mean, that's like such a cool, even you saying like free from employment, like most people would say I lost my job or whatever. And I don't know, it comes back to your positivity, but also like there's an energy in your direction that I think is really neat. And that notion of kind of like, and that's what I would say to all designers or anyone who makes stuff. We have so much decision and ability to kind of, when we're miserable or we know that we need to change, it's up to us to go make that change. So it was cool to hear you say that I'm going to go put this out. And you did all the things, right? Like set up a business, built your website, like figured out. So the design all had to help. The design background, the business of design background had to help in that, right? Yeah. As I mentioned, the first time I met you, you were doing a live painting right here on Pearl. And as I've gotten to know you, you do a lot of like live painting, do festivals, that kind of thing. In my mind, that kind of public, I'm at work doing my thing kind of challenges that stereotypical notion of the sequestered artist kind of a way. Do you have both facets of that? You know, like how does that balance out? Do you like, oh, I'm looking forward to going and working. Do you like that part of it? Because it's almost like, I wouldn't say it's performance art because you don't necessarily have music on and you're flamboyant or anything like that. I've watched you. You're like really just doing your thing. Is it different doing work in the studio and at a festival?
I think it is. Like I can definitely, obviously, like focus more when I'm working in my studio. But the main benefits I've found from like working in public or working in front of people is that it's really easy to show your process that way, of course. But also it's kind of like, it's an attention getter, for one thing. And then also it provides a point of connection for conversation. And I find that's much more helpful than people just looking at a finished piece that's framed and on the wall. There's more kind of like points that I can like kind of hit if I'm showing them the process. And also it's good for business. It's good for exposure. I've, sold pieces right off the easel, which is always nice. So,
I mean, it does come back to and you're talking a little bit about process here. You mentioned that when you head into work, I think this is much more of a design, probably, approach to where someone may wake up in the morning and part of their art practice is, I'm moody, so therefore the work is moody. But you enter into your work with some inspiration, usually a reference piece, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe multiple.
Sure.
But there's a plan when you walk into your work. So is there periods of like, hey, within this traditional process, which to me seems, and I don't mean to demean it, but it has a plan. And I think that may be something that most people, when they think about art, it is super expressive. I'm upset today, so it's going to look like this, or I'm happy, right? But yours has like a through line in it that is part planned, but do periods of expression show up in it? Meaning like there was some music on, there's joy, there's anger, whatever that is. Like, does that represent in the work?
That's something that I'm trying to incorporate more. I kind of view like the creation of art on a spectrum. On one end, you have like kind of like this real emotion and intuitive approach. And on the other hand, you have like more of a rational, calculating approach.
Right.
And mine's definitely more on the rational side. And I'm trying to work more towards the emotional, kind of like spontaneous end of that spectrum, just because I'm curious to see what comes out. I want to expand kind of my toolbox per se. But I just think it's always important to kind of like find ways to get out of your lane as an artist, because it's very easy just to kind of get caught in a style and just kind of keep repeating that thing or a theme, and not really exploring outside it. So
And there is a danger though too, right? Like in the sense of trying to build a reputation as an artist, you have to have something that's recognizable in continuity, almost like a brand, right?
it is a brand.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is interesting because, like, when you do the live events and you're painting, the pressures are different than working alone, right? And I probably maybe pressure is not the right word, but do things ever emerge in that work that you're like surprised by because you're like maybe working a little bit outside of the normal comfort zone? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably just talking about happy accidents,
Yes,
right?
totally. Yeah. I was talking to this person and, something kind of drifted out or.
Yeah, I think so, but that can happen in the studio as well. So usually when I'm working in front of people, I have it pretty planned out because I don't want to have to think too much.
Right.
It's usually just like I'm blocking on color or shading or just working on some details that don't really take too much a thought outside of like kind of like the mechanical routine that I've already developed.
Yeah.
So,
And that's interesting you bring up that point because I think as I'll use this term for myself, a more senior graphic designer, having done it for a long time, I'm finding one of the things is the hard work is the pre-planning of it, right? Thinking about the idea, concepting the layout, and now almost as I get to the point of I know what it's going to be like, the manifestation of it is like, oh, fuck, that's drudgery or it's work. Do you ever arrive like, oh, I'm super excited, like some of the examples, like a particular bird or an animal that you find, and you're like, oh my gosh, I know what it's going to look like now. Is there any step to like, now I just have to go make it? Or because sometimes there is that you've solved the problem and that's what's really rewarding to creatives. Where's that fit in for you? Or do you still love the execution and the kind of...
I do like the execution. Sometimes I make bad decisions in the planning that lead to, I don't know, spending a lot more time on a piece than I really wanted to. Or
the medium you work in is unforgiving too, though.
Yeah.
So a mistake does it mean start over?
Not necessarily. I do have some tricks, and I feel like my work is planned enough by the time that I'm actually painting that any mistakes I can kind of like smooth over or kind of just incorporate into the piece itself.
Right.
But you got a
I think,
more
but
specific
there's some of
question before that.
No, it was more about the idea of like, I feel like sometimes the executional leap after you've concepted is now an additional step. And I'm realizing that in my own work, that if it's, and it's a little bit different, right? Because you're doing more inspired representation versus I've got to go lay out another website for an enterprise software company. So,
I think back to like more of like when I was a graphic designer. You know how like during the day you have periods where you're going to be more creative. There's going to be periods where you're not feeling creative. You take care of admin stuff.
Yeah.
I think of my process in that terms, like when I'm concepting a piece or working on the composition. That's a very rational part of my brain that takes, a certain level of alertness and thought. And there are times when I'd rather be doing that than the painting, which is a little bit more, I can find the flow zone, turn on music and just like get lost in it without like those kind of like planning and thinking skills that are necessary up front.
Yep.
So I do kind of plan around that. It's always nice to have different pieces going as well that are in different stages, so that if I'm not in like the real kind of rational thinking, planning mindset, I can just like go paint for a couple of hours and I've still been productive.
Yeah.
And I can go
Well,
home.
I think that's an interesting, like number one, more experienced creatives often, I think that sign of creative maturity is when you do figure out I work best at doing these things.
Yeah.
And so like I refer to it as like high hand, low mind power. That's when I do like things like edits, but then you do realize like, hey, these periods of the day, I'm really good at I should do concepting or whatever that is. And that's interesting to hear you. And it doesn't surprise me because of your background in design. I think that's a carryover. So it comes up here a lot at Caffeinated. We talk about our athletic interests and how it impacts our pro careers, and music also happens in that too.
Yeah.
And like you're a fan of dark music, metal, and a number of genres and things like that. Can you look back at any of your work and go, oh, I was listening to so-and-so a lot during that phase, or a particular album? Because a lot of times I'll look back and I'm like, oh, I was listening to a ton of Bad Brains during that. And I see it in it, and I'm probably the only one that sees it in that. But do you, not that saying that you could, you open up and, hey, this painting I was listening to, blah, blah, blah. But
yeah.
As you look back through your work, is there any connection to like what was the musical inspiration kind of playing at that time?
Definitely when I first started out, like I would say I was very informed by kind of like moody, atmospheric neo-folk and super niche, but Cascadian black metal. And
so is that Pacific Northwest specifically black metal? That's cool. There is there's very, it's regional.
Obviously it's wet and dark. And
it has to be. Yeah. It's interesting because I think some people might say and look at your work and maybe who aren't connected to those forms of like genres of music, and they don't see the continuity. But I think being a fan of some of those worlds, like I can see some of the mythical nature of the animals and honoring the fauna and that kind of stuff. Is that where you kind of got your start in your choice of like what your subject matter was going to be? Because primarily you work in flora and fauna, right? Like animals, plants.
Well, I've just been like, I don't know, wildlife lover and an outdoors lover like my entire life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what naturally just kind of like came to me. I did do a lot of like wildlife themed art when I was in college, particularly like in printmaking, and like I'd say like it was probably like birds that mostly like caught my fancy, particularly like their feather patterns and wing patterns and iridescence and all that. I just like really enjoy working with. So
your work is obviously super graphic in nature, and I think you used the word geometry or geometric when we were kind of like unpacking how to describe it. Talk a little bit about the arrival at kind of your style and the shaping of that. Like obviously background in graphic design, so it kind of makes sense, but line work, your shading choices, like how did you start to go, and then all of a sudden the turn from like more curvilinear stuff to geometric? What was the inspiration? Or
it was kind of one of those happy accidents where I had this sketch in my sketchbook that I didn't like. And I liked part of it, so I slapped some tracing paper over it to kind of like fix the line work. And I like had scribbled some colored pencil on there, and like seeing like the two layers of the line work of the drawing that I thought was bad behind the tracing paper where I'd drawn over it and done some shading was like this real kind of like aha moment for me. Just the way the shading was like very natural going over like the tubular side of this bird, but then there were kind of like these kind of like harder lines drawn underneath. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. And so my first few pieces, I was basically trying to capture what I had just done in that little sketch with the tracing paper over it. And it really just kind of took off from there. And I was working very like curvilinear at the time and more natural line treatments. And I think there isn't really a rational explanation why I started doing harder edges and sharper angles. I think it was just the evolution through repetition when you're repeatedly, creating artwork and, sketching a lot, like things that you like, you're going to start to accentuate, and things that like you think are like kind of lame, you're going to kind of do away with. And that's how that's how an artist develops their style, really.
Well, and
so.
I think it's really interesting to hear, and this is one thing I really push on, like a lot of designers that I'm working with or seeing their work kind of come to, is in the digital sense of building tools that allow you to see things you might not see very rapidly. And I do think there is a speed component to me, but it's really interesting to hear you talk about that like layering effect. And this is one of those things that where I found success in graphic design is like I am definitely not a light-handed designer. It's more like, okay, this isn't working, get a bigger hammer is often my joke, right? And so, but that overworking of stuff and really just not quitting at it is something that I think is really interesting to hear you kind of talk about that. Also, the layering and the way that you were kind of exploring and pushing and kind of that constant refinement. When we caught up the last time, you were describing some new work you were doing, and I think I just saw it on Instagram like last night or maybe Thursday. Or yesterday was Thursday. And I think what you were describing was your tattoo commission, because you were talking about doing, and to me, when I first saw your work, and as a fan of tattoos, I was like, oh, this is such a natural translation. In fact, a lot of my tattoo friends say that watercolor's is the bridge between fine art and tattooing. It was interesting. So you want to talk about it a little bit? Because I saw a piece recently, you had mentioned, hey, I got their, I think it's shoulder dimensions or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the Oklahoma piece.
Okay, that was actually a forearm round.
It's a forearm. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. But still, it's somewhat abstract, right? Because you're not doing the work on the skin. You have to go map the skin, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to give that to you. Does that change your process a little bit? I mean,
the real challenging thing about that was thinking about like the arm basically being a cylinder, and the edges of the artwork had to come around and connect at the back to have like a continuity around the whole thing. So that was super challenging, particularly since, of course, a forearm isn't like a perfect cylinder. It tapers.
Yeah, it tapers.
And I kind of like, there was a couple parts where I'm just going to kind of leave to the tattoo artist to figure out how those connect.
Well, and did you find yourself, you do work really physically, right? So were you taking your paper and kind of like visualizing it?
I didn't go as far as actually rolling it up, but I would, like I use trace paper, like I drink it like water. But like tracing the one side and then bringing it over to the other side to make sure everything lines up. And so
but that's probably like the graphic designer in you too, because like you did physical stuff, environmental graphic design, signage, and I would imagine, right? We were talking about a project that you're doing, and it kind of cracked me up how long it's been going on, but you're doing an installation in parks?
It's an interpretive and art installation project up on Vail Pass for the Department of Transportation. And it includes a lot of really fun features. Like I designed like this custom railing for their viewing deck, designed a really cool monument sign that has like some layered weathered steel panels, and then I'll be painting a couple of pretty big murals in there as well.
No kidding.
As well as like a lot of illustration work for the interpretive waysides there that talk about the history of the place and the wildlife and stuff like that. So
and I think this illustrates the point though. Like I think what you're doing in there and your ability as like a designer, Big D, is like you're not worried about the medium in that point. And I think that's one thing I'm always excited about when I meet creative people, that you work so much in paper and on wood and things like that. But then when you can also easily, fluidly like start thinking about, well, this is how I would do a railing. This is how I would layer multiple objects. Did you have to kind of like work at the ability to kind of think in physicality like that? Or is that something that came out of your trade work? Or how did you arrive at the ability to kind of like concept in those styles?
I think, just working in design firms that specifically...
That was the stock and trade.
Worked in, the physical realm.
Yep.
That's where that experience came from, so...
have you ever taken like that, obviously you have the ability to... You do a lot of like festivals and things like that, so I've, a lot of times artists go there, they set their work up. Do you ever get kind of creative with the way that you like present your work or hold it for people to come experience it? Have you gotten into that phase yet where you're like,
not really. It's like,
that's the next thing for you? I think.
it's such a crunch to get your booth up and get everything displayed. It's like I lean more towards like a streamlined approach.
Yeah, just keep it clean and post the work.
And you don't want to overshadow the work. You want
Right.
you want the work to come to the front. So
Yeah. Well, that work that we were talking about, the tattoo, was recently was a commission.
Yeah.
And so like commissions are a very common thing for artists to do, because who doesn't like money? I know I do.
Right.
But what I thought was telling about your approach and your kind of like your practice and the whole positivity that you kind of like bring to stuff. And this might be the wrong word, but you mentioned in our last talk that sometimes that commission work will force you to do some things you might not normally do, right? Is that from a subject matter standpoint, composition, all of the above? Talk about that for a little bit.
yeah, usually it's like I like it because usually like the client will have they'll have an idea of what they want, like a specific animal or whatever,
Right.
and usually that's something that I wouldn't have chosen. So that's and I like that because
sometimes there are like animals that aren't in
yeah.
the fauna circle, like you're looking at more commonly, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it does kind of engage like kind of like the problem solving side of my brain that I feel like does come from my design background, and like how can I solve this problem? So and through that process I found that I can like kind of like step out of my own box and still create something that's within my brand.
Right.
But it isn't something that I would have come up with without, the client's prompt.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that's what was telling about that tattoo work that I saw that you did. And I was like, this is so undeniably you, but it was not only the patterning, obviously it was in the shape of fitting around a forearm or something like that, but I could look into it, and this is me, armchair art critic, being like, oh, I see his work in it, but it was almost like someone had obviously plugged different parts into it. And to me, it was a neat yield, I guess, is where I was going with that, is that it proves out that how you're kind of staying on top of like, these are my values. And I think that's a thing that a lot of creatives face as a challenge is like, hey, when I get tasked to do things that are maybe outside of my normal patterning, how do I still remain true to myself about doing them and stuff? And I think, I would say more often than not, when I talk to artists about commissions, they almost look at it as like a necessary evil versus like a potential opportunity for their work. And that was what was cool hearing you talk about that. No, I like it because it makes me do these things.
Yeah. And I'm not like, to go back to that, I'm not going to take on a job that doesn't like fit with me,
Right.
or if I get like a vibe from the client that's not meshing, like I can say
You're
no.
like
I'm not
the guy
gonna-
shows up and is like,
Yeah.
can you do like Woody Woodpecker with like flames? Like that, probably I don't see you.
Dude,
I've talked to enough
I've got
tattooers.
stories.
Yes, I can imagine. I've talked to enough tattooers where they're like, yeah, the person came in and they wanted like a tiger, but their name and the stripes, and the guy was like, now get out of here. So out of that work though, do you kind of ever get to a thing you're like, that was super neat, and then it becomes a pattern or something that's yielded back into your own work?
boy, I wouldn't say consciously.
New color pattern? Okay.
Yeah. I definitely like, for that last piece that you're talking about, was much more colorful than I think I would normally work. But other than that, like, yeah, I would say my core art practice of working on paper and wood probably informs the tattoo designs more than the other way around.
Right,
so.
right. So it's when I feel like when I talk to you, you don't really bring up the stuff that when I talk to more designers, like the designers, we tend to like start telling like, oh, dude, it's been tough lately. Like there's some existential crisis about a font or something like that. And you don't seem to ever like come across to me like that. And I know you get pressures though, because it was interesting. You even alluded to it a minute ago, like packing up for like a festival or something, there are stresses in that, right? How do you kind of like manage like staying inspired and all that kind of stuff as you're moving to like the more business side of it? Do you consciously go, okay, cool, I'm parking this time to get excited about the work? Or like you said, you lose yourself in the work sometimes. How do you kind of balance the two? Is it a conscious effort?
Yeah, like just in terms of like planning, like my days, I always try to get the admin and business stuff done first.
Yep.
Just so I can have that huge chunk the rest of the day for creative time. But it's certainly a balance, and that's one of the realizations I came to when I chose this path. Is just like the business side takes so much more time than I had ever even considered. Maybe even like 50% of my time. Like I'm, managing inventory of retail partners, getting prints made, applying to festivals and exhibitions, doing marketing, doing gallery outreach, fulfilling orders. It's like a whole thing. Like I'm a business. So
yeah. Well, and it's funny because like as this talk was coming up, we had been in communication, and you're really good about your newsletter, but like I got one, and the way you phrase your headlines is like, oh, he's checking in with me, because they're very personal, actually, your newsletters, which is hilarious.
You think that.
Yeah, and I saw it come through, and I'm like, oh, he has to ask me a question. I like super like leaned in, and so anyway, but yeah, you do work at it like a brand, and I'm always curious for people that I admire and see their work, like what's going on behind the scenes, and is it conscious? Because I've met people where it's very unconscious in their workflow, and I do this thing where I've literally with work-life balance, I had a really hard time keeping the two super separate, because I've talked to creatives that are like, I have this thing here and I have this thing here, and they never overlap, and I'm like, man, that is a lot to manage. So I try not to do that. So we all have heroes. Your work obviously draws from lots and lots of inspiration, genres, styles, and you kind of harness them all into obviously one like unique look. But talk a little bit about some of the influences or impacts on your work. I see Japanese, I see famous illustrators. Like, I love the combination of it, but how did you kind of like decide where you're going to kind of draw from? And who?
I would say kind of like the initial one was an artist and musician named John Dyer Baisley, who's the lead singer of Baroness, who does all their artwork, and he's like really kind of a Renaissance man. Like his artwork is just like phenomenal.
Did he do all the art for the albums? Are all concepted too, like color theory and kind of stuff too? Yeah. If you haven't checked out Baroness, pretty cool.
I think he was like a SCAD dropout or something.
Oh,
like
that does not surprise me. Yeah.
And that was pretty much probably the main driver, because he does a lot of kind of like the outlining and the shading that I use, but also like several others kind of in that space, like Richie Beckett, of course, and who does like Mastodon and Cave-In.
Yeah, he did. And then actually he did two really recently that I was like, I bet they were on the easel next to each other, because I'm like, I actually was in Spotify, and I was like, dude, what album am I listening to? So yeah.
But I find myself drawn to a lot of commercial illustrators. One particularly who was a Disney illustrator in the 50s. His name is Avend Earl, who does these really amazing like landscapes and just really breaks the formula and makes them so much more graphic than a lot of like kind of just like the traditional landscape art that you see. And then an artist who's, I'm sure a lot of designers have heard of her, Victo Nye. Like her work is just like, like if I need inspiration, like I'm gonna check out her work. So
have you gotten to meet any of your kind of like heroes?
I have met John Baisley before,
and impressed. You know, like what they always say,
we had a good chat.
Did
like,
you? Okay, good.
You know the old saying about like never, like
oh yeah,
don't have
that's
any
where I was going.
expectations when you meet your heroes. Yeah. But no, that was a good one.
That's cool. That's really cool. I think we are in such an interesting period as people who make, and our ability to reach other people who make. Like, I tell design students all the time, if I wanted to meet my heroes while I was in design school, I would have to like go to New York and walk around on the street, because there wasn't Instagrams and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's fascinating now that you could be like, share your work, or someone else will share your work. And then those kind of things are like, or I've had people where I really respect them and they'll comment on something. And I'm like, I feel like I'm 12 years old or something. I'm like, holy shit, they like my stuff? Like, that's so cool. And anyway. All right, a little fun time for you. We're going to get out of big dirty subjects. So this is a kind of few choose 'em scenarios. Birds or buffaloes?
Birds.
I figured that's what it was
Tough
going to be.
one.
YOB or Yob?
Yob.
I actually had to go. There's a Reddit on it, by the way. Yob, the band.
Yeah.
And guy's name. Anyway, canvas or wood?
Wood. Yeah.
Bikes or driving?
Bikes.
Has to be. Festivals or studios?
Studios.
Last one, 60s album art or 80s CD art?
Oh, man.
See, this is the stumpers, man. The rest of this has been easy.
I'm going to say CD art
So,
because
I mean,
of, what's his name, Ralph Nagel, and
yes. I don't know if you've ever as a kid going through design school a long time ago, that was the CD generation, right?
Yeah,
and I remember I'm like, I want to go get a job in doing this, and I would take apart like Tool. The Tool CDs were insane, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, well, thank you that was fun. As someone kind of like really deeply embedded in the art community, especially here in Colorado, like where do you see the kind of like the role of art and artist headed? Do you think that we're going to get more respect? The arts will finally get some credit? Like, where do you see it kind of all going? I only asked that question because as we had a really great talk years ago with Mike Giant, the graffiti artist. And he mentioned why he left San Francisco, because it reached a threshold of, I'll call it like affluency, where artists couldn't work in that community anymore.
Yeah.
And so like he kind of called it the decline of the art class. And it's really interesting because you think about the impact on culture and that kind of stuff. But where do you see it happening? I love what Boulder's doing for the kind of northern arts district. But like, what do you see its future in this area and for artists? Is it burgeoning? Is it going to get tougher?
That's a tough question. I definitely think it's burgeoning, getting better. Particularly, like I want to say that's evident in like the mural festivals and kind of like the more acceptance of that in public art, which I think Boulder's maybe playing catch up a little bit, particularly compared to like Denver and
I mean, even lots of big cities are finally seemingly really starting to commit serious money to that and provide for it.
But I feel like Colorado is full of like microcosms. Boulder is a little challenging. We don't actually have like an official creative district here.
That's why I feel like North Boulder's trying to be that.
Yeah. And that's, I'm not terribly knowledgeable about how all this works, but I think that does affect like funding for the arts and, having grant opportunities for artists.
Right.
And Boulder's kind of challenging as well, just because of the commercial real estate economy, there's just not a lot of opportunities for galleries here.
Yeah, that was Mike's point, that change to the ability for people to have affordable studio spaces does affect how that goes down.
Yeah, and of course those studio rent spaces are going to go up over time. So I don't know. I'm trying to keep an open mind about
and your
Boulder,
positivity comes through, but I liken it to, even the Renaissance era where wealthy families started supporting art because that's what it was. There was a social status that came along with like, Rembrandt's my guy, like whatever. He's not Italian, but you know what I'm saying. Any advice that you kind of give to emerging artists, or particularly those maybe even thinking about changing a creative path that you kind of have, that you wish you had kind of applied, given those rules to yourself? I think you did it fairly straightforward, but you also learned a lot along the way.
Yeah. I think it always comes back to just getting comfortable with exposure and getting your work out there and getting as many eyeballs on it as you can. And then it's easy to say, it's tougher to do, but just do it. Don't wait for anybody's permission or validation, because you're never going to get it.
Right.
So,
cool.
yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you guys all for being guests here. If you haven't checked out Overworks, which is Andrew's website, go check it out. Also, be sure to head up to North Boulder this evening. It's a First Friday, so open studio. So Andrew will be having open studio. Also, the Burger Fort guys studio will be open, so check out their work. And grab some of your cool promo cards in the back there. What else? Thank you all so much for being here. First Friday event, please come back, join us. Next Friday, our first Friday in December will feature local Google designers and lecturers here at Studio, Spencer Seifrig and Kelly Dean. So come back and join us for that. Thank you so much. Thanks you Buck Ross folks and Coop. Catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us at Caffeinated Mornings on Instagram. That's really how you'll kind of stay up to date on what we're doing. I love you all. Thank you so much for being part of our community.
Thank you.
Cool, dude. Thank you so much, man.